Wuthering Waves has finally come, and so have I, which means that the mobile game ads have probably hit every single webpage you visit. Or you used to play another mobile game but wanted to try something new. Either way, you're new to Wuthering Waves. Don't worry, I'm here to help. Look at this. Hope that helps. My name is Braxophone, and here are 5 beginner tips for Wuthering Waves players, whether you're new to gachas or a veteran. A gacha game's entire framework relies on the fact that you're too busy touching grass to play for more than a couple hours a day. Somebody should probably tell them. With that in mind, your gameplay is usually limited to only gaining a certain amount of resources daily, and the way Wuthering Waves does this is through the Waveplate system, which is essentially just your daily stamina. When you're a lower level, you want to make sure that you use it on the right resources. It might be tempting to go for tacit fields for echoes to try and build your characters early on, especially since that's where they can get a lot of their stats from, but you actually want to avoid spending wave plates on tacit fields until you reach at least databank 15. The reason that you want to wait is that you won't start getting the highest stats and highest rarity echoes until that level, and even then it's still iffy just because the drop rate is only 30%. When you're new, the most important thing to focus on is your base stats, which means using your wave plates on things like simulation training, which can give you leveling materials for your characters, weapons, and your echoes. After all, your actual gameplay and skill matter more than the build you end up with, at least in the early game. Plus, you'll be collecting echoes just as you play the game passively. Leveling up your databank is harder than completing the National Pokédex, but once you get there by collecting every echo along the way that you find, that's when farming tacit field can become a little bit more worthwhile. Either way, you can always just collect echoes by committing animal genocide. PETA might not like it, but your stamina and wallet will. If there's one thing that I don't like about Union level, it's the stem from the word unity, since it reminds me of what could have actually been a decent game. But you do need to level this up so you can progress your characters and account, and there's actually ways to level it pretty quickly. When you're out of things to do for the day, you can always just go pick mints and do quests for experience, since those aren't really time gated. But the most important thing to do to level up quickly is to complete your daily tasks every day. That includes using all of your wave plates every day for resources, but it also includes daily tasks in your guidebook under activity. By completing and collecting all of the rewards, you can actually get a whole 2,000 Union experience every single day. It's a huge chunk of experience that you do not want to miss. But there's even more ways to level quickly than that. If you hate reading, I have bad news, because we're opening the guidebook again. But this time, we're checking out Milestones, which has a list of tasks that actually aren't time sensitive. Well, they are for you because you're trying to level fast, but you can clear these whenever. Each one you clear will give you a bit of experience and a ton of solid rewards. If you're ever stuck, make sure to check out the guidebook. This tip is probably the most important tip in this entire video. Do not spend Asterite on standard pulls, unless you really know what you're doing. You might think that that's super silly and easy advice, especially if you're a gacha veteran, but trust me, I know people who've played gacha games for years that still get baited into this by the guaranteed 5-star. This happens on so many games. Look, I know bro is hot, he's literally Sephiroth with Shadow Clone Jutsu, but it's not worth it. Here's why. Asterite is a very limited resource that you'll eventually start to run dry on. At the start of the game, you'll get a ton of free pulls, but once those are gone and strong limited 5-stars come out that you want, you're gonna be pinching pennies. Especially if you're free to play, which is a majority of you guys because college debt doesn't fuck around. The early 5-star banner is great, and you should pull on it when you have the standard pulls to use. But you can get the 50 pulls naturally without having to spend the Asterite and keep the rest of it for when Yinland comes out. I also don't recommend spending Asterite on anything but limited character and weapon pulls in this game. If you're wailing on the game, that's a different story, and you should let me borrow your account. The bank one. But generally, just save up and don't jump the gun for an early 5-star. Many of the 4-stars and starter characters in this game are good enough until you've reached your first 5-star naturally with the pulls that are given to you. And I'll actually have a video on that soon too, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see it. So earlier in the video, I told you how to spend your stamina, but I never told you exactly what to do in detail. That's because I need to pad this video for ad revenue. Let me tell you a story about my first ever gacha game. We don't talk about that one. When I started a game called Genshin Genshin Impact, I actually had no idea what I was doing. I ended up not spending any of my stamina, and because from early levels your characters could level up with experience from killing random enemies, I actually never leveled up my weapons, because I thought they were just leveling up with my characters. Oh, and I also didn't use XP books to level up my characters either. It was all just raw dogging it. After many other gacha game playthroughs, and after learning how damage calculations and Wuthering Waves works, it's clear that leveling up your character and weapon are actually a good idea. You want to start off by picking one single character and investing in them. Wuthering Waves is a team-based game, but most of the content is soloable, since there's not really a huge reliance on swaps outside of the skills and extra damage that you'll need later in endgame. At the start of the game, it's best to build one single character to carry you until you get them maxed for your current union level, and then you can work on your teammates. In Wuthering Waves, the main character is actually pretty good, and Yang Yang is solid for grouping small enemies and also just pretty fun to play. But ultimately, the character you pick doesn't really matter as long as they can do damage, which even the healers can do early on in the game. Just level them to 20 and their weapon to 20, and then start the next character. Then, once you've moved up union levels, rinse and repeat for the higher level caps. By leveling one character and weapon at a time to max, you're increasing their base stats, which is what certain gear attributes actually scale off of. Enemies at a lower level have less crazy stats to worry about, meaning that one super buff character can carry all of your other characters super early on. And as a bonus for this, for most characters, attack is a pretty safe bet. But if you're ever unsure, you can check by going to their Forte menu and by clicking on their skills. Or alternatively to all of this, you could just get dungeon and steamroll the entire game. The only thing worse than farming on an MMO is farming on a gacha game. I do think that Wuthering Waves strikes a solid balance though, because it ends up being a pseudo creature collector by the time you're up there in level. As you're collecting echoes through your playthrough, you'll notice that you can get a ton just by running around. Well, you unfortunately can run out of enemies in the overworld to farm. However, if you go into co-op with a friend, you can actually farm echoes with them. Now, all you have to do is make a friend. When you're looking for the perfect stats on a specific echo, co-op is a fun and easy way to farm. Also, if you happen to run into a shiny echo or one that has an alternate color, both you and your friend can collect it in co-op. You may not be able to feed level 0 echoes into other ones for levels, but you can aim for the right stats and keep trying until you win. There's also a new system they added for launch called Data Merge, where you can take level 0 echoes and fuse them and try to get higher rarity echoes out of it. And it's super helpful for any lower level echo trash that you want to get rid of. Farming in co-op is a great solution when you're out of enemies in your world, but it's also just really fun. There's actually 6 tips in this video, but 5 tips sounds better in the title, so that's why that's there. If you come from other games, there's one major difference that Wuthering Waves has with most titles. It has important parry mechanics. Yeah, sure, you could just try and always dodge, but bosses in this game attack pretty frequently, and there's a stagger bar for some enemies that you'll need to break to deal maximum damage and open up DPS windows. This gets especially difficult in high-end and late-game content, so it's good to learn it when you're early. Because of the existence of this stagger bar, it makes parrying a massive damage gain overall, since when you parry, it drops that stagger bar by a ton. The nicest part of this game is that skill matters more than characters' actual multipliers, so as you get better, you'll see higher DPS overall, and more parries is more rewarding damage. You might have to drop a league game or two to practice though. I know. Horrendous.